Good afternoon, and welcome to the Veterans Forum. This program is coming to you from the Concord Television Studios here in Concord, New Hampshire. It's entitled The Veterans Forum. It's a program that we've been putting on in conjunction with the Library of Congress's Veterans History Project, which started back in the year 2000. What we're doing is trying to give every guy and gal who served in any of the services in any of the wars, from World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Desert Storm, and what we're going through right now, if you can and will share those experiences with us here in a televised interview. That data, plus the paperwork that goes with it, will be filed in the Library of Congress's database so that anybody from here on out who wants to find out what you did and how you reported it has access to it. My name is Bob Stevens. I've had the honor of doing this show now since the year 2005. There is no one story that stands out better than the others, but basically what we're doing is recording history, but it's being recorded by the people, the guys and the gals who made it. So if you can and will want to share those experiences, please get a hold of us. The address will be on the back of the program to tell you where and how to contact us. We'll do all we can to make it worth your while, but if you look at it this way, as 2 or 3 of the POWs I've interviewed say, you know, it's perhaps one of the best priceless legacies that you could leave your family. Long when we're long gone, your kids and your grandkids would say, hey, I talked to Grandpa the other day. It sounds funny, but you'd be surprised how many tears are shed in that quick meeting. Today we have another young fellow, well, he's younger than he used to be, who did his thing way back when. I'll ask Paul to identify himself, name, rank, and serial number, if you will, and then we'll take the show from there. You're on, sir. If you would, tell us your full name, spell your last name for the record, your branch of service, dates of service, and where you now live.
Paul R Murphy, M-U-R-P-H-Y, D11-9298, I still remember my number, and postal clerk, 3rd class, was in the United States Navy.
Okay, well, how come you got first class? That's something you're going to express later on?
What's that?
You got first class down here.
Oh, this is the FDR. That's the ship I was on.
Okay, oh, we're loaded with stuff, folks.
Okay.
All right, and where do you now live?
I live in Deerfield, New Hampshire.
Okay.
Originally from Concord, Mass. I was telling Bob previous that the ship I was on, this Jesse L. Brown, a man from Concord, Mass, was a recipient of the Medal of Honor, tried to save Jesse L. Brown when his plane crashed in Korea, and he lives in my hometown. He was at the commissioning for the ship, the Jesse L. Brown, which I had the privilege of serving on, and I recall vividly picking him up at the airport and taking him back, and it was a privilege to meet such a wonderful human being.
Good. Thank you for that. Now that we know who you are and what you're now doing, I'd like to be nosy and go back and find out, as we said earlier, how you came to be, like, for example, where and when were you born? What was your life like growing up as a kid, way back in those early days? Anything in school that stood out? Any brothers, sisters, or family members that served in the services that give you some kind of a clue? And then we'll take it from there.
Okay, Bob.
It's your show.
I was born in Brighton, Mass. at St. Elizabeth's in Valentine's Day, so I'm Aquarius, 1952. And the doctor was James Bradley. He has a little card that he signed, and he also wrote the book, Flags of Our Fathers. Same name, not the same person. My dad was a principal in Cambridge. He served in the U.S. Army during World War II.
Principal of what? High school, college?
Kindergarten through 8th grade.
Oh,
of the Russell School.
We don't know. This
okay, Bob. And he died in 1990, and the library is named in his honor. My mother was from Brighton, Mass., and she served in the Marines that she was always very proud of, and she stayed in the Marines. She was a radio operator in 1943, got out when the war was over, but she stayed in the reserves until 1997, so that's 54 years. One time I was at the Atlanta airport when I worked for Federal Express, and 7 o'clock in the morning, Ted Williams, the famous baseball player and probably more famous being a Marine pilot, was there. Nobody else at the airport, just 2 or 3 people. And I saw him over there, and I didn't want to bug the guy, but I said, well, I better get an autograph. So I went over to the shop, got a card had the Atlanta Braves on it. They weren't much of a team at the time, but I borrowed a pen from the guy at the store and went over and talked to Ted Williams just briefly, and I asked for his autograph, and he said, "Who should I make it out to?" And I said, "Well, why don't you make it out to my mother? She's been in since 1943." So he said, "Give me that damn card." And he signed it, greatest hitter of all time, Ted Williams, Semper Fi. So I brought it home to my mother. Okay. So it was quite a memento.
Good. Now, you've short-circuited about 50 years of your lifetime.
Okay.
I remember I want to go back and talk about your family and growing up. We'll get to what happens as we go. That's what we're trying to do right now.
Okay.
So what was your life like?
I lived in, when I was a year and a half old, we moved to Concord, Mass, where it all, according to President Obama, that's where it all began in our country here. And it was a great childhood growing up. The Boston Patriots, which are now the New England Patriots, made their home there in 1960. So we were young kids and used to see the players. And my friend across the street, Rich, had a paper route, and he had all the Patriot players on his route. Very interesting time.
Did he ever get any autographs?
Oh, we had autographs. And in fact, my brother, my older brother, Tom, I'm from a family of 8. He was a real character, shall we say, and he became like their water boy. He just made himself into this, and the Patriots used to practice it with the National Guard Armory. It was kind of shipshod, shall we say. It's just where they had drills for the Army people on, in their 2-week tours. That's where they'd come during the summer.
Reserves.
In the reserves. And that's where the Patriots had their training camp.
Okay.
And so my brother got autographs from all the players, and he went down to the 5 and 10 downtown, and he had it. I didn't know they had lamination machines back then, but he had it laminated. And so he gave it to me and had all the names, all the fancy names, Babe Parilli, Jim Colclaw, all these players from way back when. And I sent it off to the Patriots so they could have it in their Hall of Fame. But backing up a little bit, it was a very great place to grow up. I graduated from Concord Carlisle High School, 1970, and
whoa! You're jumping and jumping. How about your family life? Your brothers and sisters. You're one of 8.
Okay.
What was their life like, and how did you interact? What were you doing? Were you good in school? Were you in any plays, sports, and so forth?
Okay. Okay.
I want to know what you really did.
All right. Yeah, like I said, I was one of 8. I was the 3rd boy. There were 5 boys, then 3 girls. It was athletics all the time. My dad coached all the Little League teams. My brother was one of the great players. And
How about yourself?
I was a average player, shall we say, but I knew all what I was more interested in what everyone else did. I knew all their batting averages and who did what and who was with who. That's kind of what I wanted to be.
A sports reporter?
I wanted to be a sports reporter, actually more so a journalist, and that was what I wanted to do. I was always interested in following the teams. I was a water boy for the local high school teams for years and years. Used to know all the players and everything that went on about it. I wasn't interested in so much in coaching, but just reporting it. I was like a broadcaster, shall we say. And so I participated in all the sports, football, baseball, hockey. We all played hockey. We all played up at the Middlesex School in Concord. That's where the rink was. Then we'd play outdoor hockey as well. My dad would come down to all the games. And one of the things about growing up in Concord, that my dad was a left-handed pitcher. And we would, on every Sunday, we would all go down to Emerson Playground, the famous playground named after the Ralph Waldo Emerson. Another famous person
High school
from Concord.
graduate boy, know all that good stuff.
Yeah. And so Emerson Playground was the place to be. And each Sunday morning, my dad would pitch, and we would play for a couple of hours, and people would, the way it worked back then, most of us were Catholic, so we'd go to church and ride our bikes down to the playground, and you could always find something to do down there. They had a fancy track, they had a football field, they had basketball courts, and you could run. It was a half mile to run it, so when you were not batting or something like that, sometimes you'd want to run, you could circle.
Just for the heck of it?
You could circle the field, and it was a half mile around. so that was really a big deal. And my dad was, I'd have to say famous. Everyone knew who he was because all the kids played. And he was a teacher as well as, went on to become a principal in Cambridge. And so it was a great place to grow up. Everybody enjoyed being from Concord, Mass. It was a famous place.
What about your sisters? You ignored them. There's
Well,
five
my
of them.
sisters, they were younger than me. One of my sisters, there were five, like I said, there were 5 boys. And then one of my sisters, Helen, was born. She was 8 years younger than me. And then 2 years later, the twins came along. And that was a big change in the family because from my dad doing everything with the boys, now the girls were on the premises. And I recall when I did join the service, how my sisters would write me these letters. They were in the 2nd and 3rd grade. They were so proud that someone had joined the military because I was the first one from my family to do so.
Any other relatives in your family, uncles and so forth, were they in the service? Cousins?
My mother had one sister. And it was always a joke that we had 8 children and they had 9. And so it seemed to be a contest. But my Uncle John, he was in the Marines, and he and my mother used to talk all the time about the Marines being superior to all the other branches of the service. And my mother was just a little thing. She was just a little over 5 feet tall, but she was so proud about being in the Marines. That was just a big deal. And she'd have her uniform, and she would go off. If I remember, she'd take, it wasn't 2 weeks she'd go, but she might go for a weekend, like maybe in one summer. We had so many kids, so you couldn't go too far. She'd go into Boston, and she also volunteered at the Red Cross, and she was just super. And so I guess you'd have to say that she was the disciplinarian in the family. My dad always wanted everyone to get along and whatnot and play all the games and stuff like that, but my mother kept us in line. And any of the kids that ever joined the Marines would know that my mother was also in the Marines too, so they would talk to her about it.
Okay. Now, what did she do when she was in the Marines? Just in the reserve, or was she actually on active duty?
No, she was a reservist. Like I said, she was a radio operator. I recall that she told us that she was stationed in San Diego, and she also spent some time in Wisconsin. I got to say, I wish I'd have spoken to her more about it because I just know she was in all the time. And she used to talk to this woman from Oregon. Her last name was Larson. They used to talk forever and a day. And I think her name was Valerie Larson. She lived in Portland, Oregon. And so you'd see the note on the counter that Valerie had called, and you knew who it was. And they used to talk all the time about the service and whatnot. And they'd meet up certain places. I remember the one time the woman won a contest from the phone company. I'll call it AT&T, but I don't know what it was back then. And she got a year's free calling.
Wow.
So she would call my mother, and they would talk. And
burn up the wire.
Oh, and it was free for a whole year. And
Hey.
it was a big joke. And of course, all kids would answer. We, think she would say to us, "You could talk all you want because it's free." It was a big deal. It was in the early '60s that I remember. But when the thing finally ran out, I think I went to through the calendar year, and it ran out, and they talked over Christmas and right up to New Year's. I think they talked New Year's Eve right up until the time it was.
And the ball came down, they would
Yeah, they would yak and yak and yak, and it was really kind of comical because I never did meet the woman, but it seems as though I knew her because it was they were such good pals, such a great relationship, and she was 3,500 miles away,
Yeah, but distance has nothing to do with friendship.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
Thank goodness for that. No, you said you had an uncle who was in the service. What did he do? Did he influence you at all?
No, not really. He was in the Marines. I couldn't tell you what he did. In fact, my father was one of 5 twins in his family as well. He had, my father was the oldest, so he joined the service, and he had one other brother join who was in the Marines. My dad was in the Army, and I just know he was stationed in London. That's all I know. I never did talk to him about it, and they never brought it up back then, which was too bad.
You wish you had.
Yeah, I really do.
That's why we're doing this show, buddy.
I got to say, I dropped the ball on that one, Bob.
Okay, hey, you tried.
Because he was so knowledgeable and whatnot. We used to joke that that show, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, he could have done it without any lifelines. He knew all the answers of everything. So
maybe.
Yeah, maybe he did. Yeah.
The question mark, maybe. When you get to that certain threshold, it's all or nothing. Wherever you are, help.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, when you were in school, Did you have any idea that you were going to be joining any service branches? What prompted it?
Well, when I was in the, remember I mentioned Ralph Waldo Emerson?
Yeah?
Well, one of the guys from my class, Ray Emerson, his brother was killed in Vietnam. I think it was 1967. And I recall that we were in English class and the principal called Ray to the office. He used to sit right behind me. You know, you'd think, geez.
Was your dad the principal?
No, my dad was in Cambridge. This was in Concord.
Okay.
And so Ray gets called to the principal's office. You know, he hadn't done anything wrong, so to speak.
What do you have for me now for?
Yeah, and he went down there and they told him that his brother was killed in action in Vietnam. And then that was probably in, say, February. Maybe 3 months later, we were taking driver's ed course in the summer. And another guy was from Carlisle. They had, you know, it's a regional school, Concord and Carlisle, small town. And Greg Can was in my class, driver's ed, and we'd gone to the first class. And the second class, the teacher gets up to tell us that Greg wasn't going to be coming to the class because his brother Doug had been killed in Vietnam. So that, you know, when you think about it back then, I remember it was October 16th, 1968, in support of the war, everyone would drive with their headlights on. That was it. Nowadays, all the cars have the headlights on.
A good safety feature.
That was a big deal. And, you know, you're a young kid. You don't really realize it. But, you know, there I was from a small town, 12,000 people in the town. We actually had 6 killed in Vietnam, which was really high ratio. So I think, you know, you think about the war, you think, you know, as I said, you're young. You don't really understand everything. At the time, I was a hawk. I couldn't say that today, but at the time, you know, when you're a young kid, you think rah, rah, rah.
Yeah,
you know.
yippee.
So I graduated from high school, and we used to play, well, actually I went to Bentley College. It's an accounting school in Waltham, and I commuted to the school. I didn't really enjoy it. It just wasn't for me. It's not that I wasn't smart enough to do it. I was really always into numbers and stuff.
Were you on a scholarship or you paying?
No, I actually, you know, from a large family, I paid my way. It's like $1,000 a semester. Seems like nothing now, but at the time it was.
Buy 2 books today.
Yeah, I know. And so we used to play hockey during the week. And like one night, like Tuesday nights, we would still play hockey up at the Middlesex School. And some of the kids that had graduated from high school, they had like teams and stuff like that. I was up there right before Christmas. And some of the guys were home from school and whatnot. We were having a game. And my friend Phil Carrigan, he was going to Lowell Tech at the time. He was an excellent athlete at the time, and he wasn't enjoying school either. So we're sitting there on the bench, and he said, I'm going to join the Navy. So he's sitting right beside me, and I said, well,
Yeah, let's go.
here we go. So I get home. I got to tell my parents. It was right around, it might have been a day or so after Christmas that I told them. And I tell them, and they, you know, like I said, you're from a large family. They got a lot on their plate. You know, 2 kids are in college, and you know, paying for that. And you know, when you're in the teaching industry, in education, they don't pay you much. So I told my dad, and he was happy that I was going to be joining the Navy. I get a call. One of my friends, Dave, he and his friend Ron are going to go with us too. So we all go over to Waltham, take the car over to Waltham, and they had these little, I call them little huts, but they're right in the square there. It's what the recruiting offices were.
Oh, okay.
You had the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force. We go to this thing. And as we drive on Main Street in Waltham, we see a McDonald's. I had never seen a McDonald's. My friends had never seen a McDonald's.
Small town.
And so, of course, we stop at McDonald's. But, you know, we go to the recruiting office. The guy was a nice guy, probably not much older than us. He was probably 22. And tells us we're going to be joining on the 21st of January. And
Now, you didn't have to sign up for a draft or anything with that.
no, actually, I should back up, Bob.
Yeah,
In 1969, the first year of the draft, I believe, was held on July 9th. At least that's what they, and the draft itself worked that, you know, however your number came up, a number was associated with the birth, you know, the date of the year. And my friend John, who joined the Marines, was July 9th. And he was number 1. I was Valentine's Day, and that was a 4. My friend Phil, he was born in April, his was 11. So we, rather than wait for the draft, which were going to be called, I guess back then, everyone 1 through 125 was going to be called at some point in time. Now, there were ways around it, education deferments and whatnot, but, you know, you were going to go. If your number came up, you were going to serve your time. And we thought it was a big joke back then. We all met down at Friendly's, and everyone had their number, and some people were in the 300s, 200s. They didn't think they'd have to go. And my number was number 4. So when I went to Bentley, I really didn't enjoy it that much. It was really a simple process. You just take the step forward and join the Navy. And the thing about the Navy was you saw they have colorful uniforms and whatnot. They let you grow your hair back then. And
Oh,
you
yeah.
know,
I didn't make that.
no, it really was enticing. They had the bell bottoms and the girls and the photos and whatnot. So when we went to the Navy recruiter, it was it was too easy for them, you know.
No, they didn't sell you. You
No,
bought in.
no, we knew. So January 21st comes about, and it's warm morning, probably 45 degrees, unusually warm. And my neighbor from across the street had just gotten out of the Marines a month before, and he'd taken a job at Howard Johnson's right on Route 2. And he came home about 4:45 in the morning. And he came home when my friend's dad was picking me up to take us. So my 2 friends were there. He picked me up, and my friend Danny that lived across the street came over to shake our hands and wish us luck. He'd already done his time in the Marines. And then we'd go over to pick up my friend Phil, and then we're going to go into South Boston. So we were into South Boston where the barracks were at.
Oh, Fargo building?
Yeah, the Fargo building. It's probably 6 in the morning. All kinds of action there. All the recruits are in this day. You know how it worked.
Oh, yeah, been
And
there.
there were tons and tons of kids. You know, everyone was young and
Fuzzy-faced and foolish.
yes, there we were. So they stood us at attention, probably 7 in the morning. Not much more than that. And we took the oath. You state your name, full name, please. And before you knew it, you were in the Navy. And the whole day was just a whirlwind, you know. They took us from there. They gave us breakfast. And we went to Logan Airport, took a bus to Logan Airport. And we were over at Logan probably by 9 o'clock in the morning. We're flying to Chicago. Most people, I had flown one time prior, because my brother went to Bowdoin College. He was on the hockey team, and they played the tournament down in Madison Square Garden in New York. And I'd gone with my mother. And back then, which obviously you wouldn't see today, you have iPhones and all these things. But back then, they used to collect the money on the plane. So we'd taken the Eastern Shuttle to New York. This was only maybe a month before I joined. That's the only time I'd ever flown. I think my mother paid $35 for us to go to New York, the 2 of us. And she paid the attendant $35. And so many people had not flown. I had, like I said, I'd seen it one time. And most people had never been to the airport, not even to pick somebody up. It just was a different time. So we get over to the airport, and everyone's so excited. And we're going to be flying to Chicago. And direct flight. So, and also I should say, Bob, that back then we talked about the GI Bill. Most of us were thinking, you know, we weren't thinking about college. We were only thinking about, we signed up for 4 years. 4 years seemed about a long time, but it doesn't really take that long. It really doesn't. It zips right along. So people from out of state had joined because the way the government worked, that education, Massachusetts being you know, with all its Harvards and MITs and whatnot, the GI Bill actually paid more for somebody from Massachusetts than it did from somebody from Texas. So there was a guy from Dallas, Texas. His name was Charles Summers. And he had flown up from Dallas, so he'd be inducted in Massachusetts. And he was, you know, pretty forward thinking that he was going to get more money for his GI Bill being from Massachusetts.
Hey, the angles.
There you go. Well, he had, like I said, he had never flown, and he got sick on the plane, and he threw up into the bag, and he lost his front teeth. So, I still remember his name because he was a couple years older than us. We were 18. He was probably 20. And, you know, like, he played the angles to think that he was going to make more, you know, with his education. So he sat right beside me. We just, my friend Phil was here, and it was Tom, and that was me, and he threw up into the bag. And then the attendant had to fish his teeth out of the bag to give them back to him. Well, we get out to Chicago, to O'Hare Airport, and the Playboy Bunny, Hugh Hefner's Playboy Bunny plane is on the tarmac. And you see this thing, and all these young kids seeing the little Playboy. It was a black plane with a white Playboy Bunny on the side of the plane, and everyone thought that was the funniest thing in the world. And as we had flown in, we had seen a McDonald's. Like I told you before, I had only seen it the one time. Many had never seen a McDonald's. Many had never flown. So we get into O'Hare Airport, and everyone thinks that the Playboy Bunny is there for them. So we get met by
Dreamer.
Yeah, I know. So we get met by the bus there, and we're all standing out on the sidewalk, and the bus comes along, and it's going to take us to Great Lakes, Illinois. I think it was I-70. It was probably a couple-hour trip to get there. And it's later in the day now. It's probably around, I'm going to say around dinner time, 5, 6 o'clock at night. And so we get on, everyone gets on the bus, and we have no idea what we're up against. And, you know, when you're young, you just take it hour by hour, not day by day, hour by hour. And we're out on the highway, maybe half an hour out, and the bus breaks down. And
It should have been an omen.
yeah, it may have been an omen, but there's probably, I'm going to say 60 to 70 kids on the bus. We're sitting on the side of the highway, and it took at least a couple of hours for someone to get there. You know, the state trooper came, and then they told them they had a bus. They were taking these sailors to Great Lakes, and then they had to get another bus out there, and it was too small and whatnot. So they finally got us there. Oh, God, it had to be 8 o'clock at night. And they take us, we all thought it was a joke, you know. Of course, we hadn't eaten or anything like that. And then we get there, and then someone's yelling at us to get in line to do this. They're going to get us bunks, and we're going to pick out your own bunk and whatnot. We had to stand in line to get 2 blankets and our clothing and whatnot. I picked the top bunk.
Your clothing at the same time tilling in?
At night. We got to Great Lakes, and, you know, we're going to be staying, and they're going to wake us up for reverie.
I know.
So we get there. It's probably, oh, God, it had to be close to 10 o'clock by the time we finally got to bed. And normally they wake up at 5 o'clock reveille. They let us sleep into 6:30. And it was absolutely freezing. We went outside. We went over to Chow. That's what they called it, big mess barracks. And the first thing I ever saw there was, we get to this mess barracks, and it was called Porter. It was named after Admiral Porter. He had spent 62 years in the Navy. In the Civil War days, he was famous for basically establishing the Navy. I think he was the first Secretary of the Navy. He joined at 17, and he died at 79, so his whole life was spent in the Navy. 62 years. Everyone's looking at this plaque. They just can't believe that something happened.
Whoa.
And most of us in for 4 years, and everyone's saying, can't wait to get out. We haven't even started. But I do recall how cold it was, and then the second day we were there, it was too cold. It was optional to go eat. I think wind chill was like 75 degrees below zero. The wind was blowing off the lakes in Chicago. The glass was blowing out of the stores in Chicago, and so most of us didn't bother eating. That's really what I basically remember about boot camp. And then 2 or 3 days later, we went over to the real place and went through.
What do you mean, the real place?
Well, we were at the, you go through this tunnel to take it so you get into the real Great Lakes. We're at like training barracks. They give you films and whatnot. So now we get over, we were company 31 or 32. 31, I think it was. And it was a big deal. You know, we had our own little thing, and everyone that was in the group, it was 31. You had a 31 on the side of your thing. You had a stencil.
On both cheeks?
Yeah, you stenciled your names and numbers on your clothing so you wouldn't lose it. And when we did the laundry, you used to hang it outside. It would freeze.
Let's back up a bit. When did you get your shots?
That was probably after the first day we got over, we got situated. Yeah, we got all kinds of shots, 6 or 7 shots. And, you know, it was, you know, you're a young kid. You think, oh, of course you're standing there, and I should say. You're standing there naked as a
In
jaybird.
the buff.
In the buff. And they give you all these shots. They had this little gun that would give you a shot in the arm for smallpox and all these things there. And it's funny you mention that because everybody got sick of some form. They had a cold or something like that. It wasn't more than a week later, we went through the gas chamber. And it was a real gas chamber. You'd sit there and they put this little...
Identify the gas.
Cyanide.
Cyanide or tear gas?
Was it? They put a little pill in the thing, and there were
I
two or
know,
three of
you
us in the box.
Walked around.
Yeah, and when you came out, your cold was gone.
Yeah.
You would drain your system. So all these shots, you may... I just remember, I call it cyanide, but it could have been tear gas. You had a little mask on. You took the mask off, and you sat in the... Yeah, I think you had shorts on, and you sat there, and the next thing you knew, you came out coughing, and your head cold would be gone. So that was the kind of a fun
way to
time.
get rid of a cold, it was cyanide.
Yeah, it was. But we did, we used to do drills. We had what you call a piece, or it's a rifle.
A real rifle or a wooden
Well,
markup?
it didn't have any weapon. It didn't have any ammunition. We'd carry this rifle, and you'd do port arms and do all these fancy little things. None of us, at least I had never had a gun before. I never had one in my hand. But my friend, they used to go out hunting and stuff like that, so they were way further advanced than I was. And of course, we went to shooting practice and whatnot, and that was part of one of the drills that we did. And my friend Dave, he's got a name, Dave Crockett, and he, he's got a famous name from the Wild Wild West. Yeah, Davy Crockett. And he showed me how to shoot and whatnot, and so I wasn't the worst one in the platoon.
Now, he showed you, or didn't you have a DI there?
Yeah, they did, but when there was all these kids lined up and nobody wants to be the worst or singled out, so they would show you how to do it and how to pull the trigger and whatnot, and I wasn't too bad. I shouldn't say I hit the target, but I wasn't the worst one in the group, which was good for me.
How many rounds did you have to shoot to qualify, or just practice bang, bang, bang?
You'd shoot into this thing and had like a bullseye on it, and if you hit the board, you got to advance, shall we say? But
Advance to what?
Not being last, not being singled out.
Oh, okay. This is new, but go ahead.
Yeah. So my friend had showed me, and you learn how to handle a weapon and whatnot, and you do all these drills and whatnot, and I recall that we never did any kind of real exercise. We might have done a couple of push-ups and a couple of sit-ups, but I think in the 12 weeks we were there, I don't think we did 100 sit-ups.
Well, as far as the damn cold outside, you'd freeze you out there.
Yeah, but you think that you would get these kids in shape. I mean, they're young, so they're usually in decent shape. They can run all day.
Not all of them.
Yeah, I know. But I recall that, the guys had gone, to Paris Island, the Marines, they did real drills.
Oh, yeah.
Real push-ups and real sit-ups and real runs. And I thought it was kind of happy days. It was kind of easy, I was young, so I was fast, and we went and did these drills and whatnot. And they do. Oh, so I told you about the guy that threw up and lost his teeth on the plane. Well, they had a boxing team. I was in this platoon 31, and they looked for volunteers to box. And this guy from Dallas, like I said, was a couple years older than us. They said you'd have a day off if you volunteered to box.
Oh.
So he
Or to
volunteered.
recover from being beat to a pulp.
And he was in the heavyweight division, and we thought you'd go and root on your team and whatnot, and it was interesting because there were probably 31 through 38, so there were probably 8 teams, and they'd have rounds of boxing. You'd go 3-minute rounds, and then you'd advance to the next thing. And we thought our guy was going to win for sure because he looked like somebody and sounded like somebody, and he was our leader, platoon leader. And maybe 2 minutes into it, he got knocked out cold. And
Did it ruin his teeth?
and no, they wore a mouthpiece, fortunately. And he never got out of his bunk for 24 hours.
Oh.
No, so he never moved.
That was the day off.
That was his day off. But I recall that, we worked, everyone, when they are young, everyone's got a mess cook at some point in time.
Oh, yeah.
KP duty, shall we say.
Gotta
And
go.
I recall that we all learned how to do that. So when we went to our first ship, that's going to be our first duty. So we go through, like I
What
said.
were you, a server, a slopper, or a pourer?
Well, as it turned out, when I did eventually get on ship, I got a kind of a cupcake thing duty, I worked in the donut shop.
Oh,
And this was a big deal that, well, let me back up a
don't
minute.
jump off too fast.
I won't, I won't. So you learn all the things about cleaning plates and doing this and that, and because that's going to be your first assignment. So I get through boot camp, and we go home. You go home for 2 weeks. That's the rule. Everyone goes home because, you know, everybody's from different parts of the country. Some people are probably not going to be going back to where they came from. They're basically trying, some of them are trying to avoid. You know, they're moving on with their lives. And like I said, I went back home to Concord, Mass for the 2 weeks, and that time just zipped by. You know?
How'd you feel when you got off the bus or streetcar? Here I am.
Well, you know, it's funny. Back then, you used to wear a uniform.
Yeah.
Proud of wearing a uniform. And you had this, I don't have a white hat here, but you wore that white hat, and everyone, you know, of course, you had the shaved head. Your hair was really, really short. And it was an exciting time. You were a young kid. You were so proud of, you know, representing your country and whatnot. And you're always cleanly shaven and whatnot. And, you know, like I said, I came from a large family, and they were all so excited. And I recall my mother seeing us when we walked up the street. And back then, you didn't take cabs and stuff like that. You put your, we called it your bag, your sea bag, and carried it home. Yeah. And I was probably half a mile from the train station. I just walked down the street, and people would wave to you and whatnot, and I'd walked home. And, you know, then you take your uniform off and go out meeting all the kids and whatnot, and everyone's asking you questions about what it was like. And it's really just the start. You know, I had turned 19 at the time, and, you know, the 2 weeks that you're home, you see all kinds of people and whatnot, but you're raring to go. So I get, my parents take me into Logan Airport. It's, I remember the date, May 1st, the 97th running of the Kentucky Derby. We stayed and watched the Kentucky Derby, and then my parents drove me into Logan. And this is kind of sad because my parents, you know, you think, you know, you're leaving home. This is, before it was kind of a joke. You know, you were going home, but I was with my 3 friends.
Going to camp for 2 weeks.
Yeah, and they were all going off to different places. One of them had already been, he was a triplet, and his hand was messed up. So when we, like I said, the first time we stood there naked, you put your hands out and stuff like that. He was missing this bone in his hand. And so he was only in the service for 9 days. Rather than go through an operation, they ousted him out of the service. He was done. One other guy had a hernia operation, so he didn't go. So when we came home after a boot camp, there were only 2 of us. So my friend Phil, he was going off to another ship. He was going down to Norfolk, Virginia. And I was going to meet the carrier, the FDR, in Rota, Spain. But to get there, I had to fly to Philadelphia. So like I said, when my parents dropped me off, I was all, it's the first time really in my life that I was all alone. You know, you got your...
And you're lonely.
Lonely. I think I had $20 to my name or whatever they'd given me. And, you know nothing. You know, like I said, it's only the second or third time I've been in the airport. You look to where your plane is. You're all nervous about being on time, worried that you make your flight. I take this flight and we get down to, I think we flew to Newark, and then I took a bus to Philadelphia. Of course, you're asking everybody. At least I was an extrovert, so I could ask somebody where to go and what to do. You get to, I was at the Philadelphia airport, and like 11 o'clock at night. Back then, they didn't have any sandwich shops, nothing open, nothing. And you sat there, and you had your bag in front. All your possessions were between your feet. You sat right there. No newspaper, nothing. You sat there, and I think my flight was at 7 in the morning, and I didn't, so I doze off, and you know, you're by yourself. There was, I think there was maybe one other person that sat there on the bench. You're sitting in the chair there, and you know, they didn't have phones or anything back then. You just sat there and you waited. And I didn't want to miss my flight, so I remember the sun coming up. It was like 5 in the morning, but they didn't have a coffee shop or anything. Like I said, I maybe had $20. I just sat there, and I'd go over and ask the attendant what time the flight is. Am I at the right gate? And this and that. And next thing you know, I saw a guy. His name was Gerald Maine. He was from Oklahoma, and he had been in boot camp with me. And he showed up, and we were going to be going to Rota, Spain, flying together. He was going to another ship, but it was so exciting to see somebody that you knew.
Oh, yeah.
Even if you really didn't know them, you had a little bit in common, you know. So we worked our way through the turnstile, shall we say. We had our bags, and we get on the flight. It's a Navy flight. It was like a 6-hour flight.
Was this MATS you're flying?
We were flying out of Philadelphia, and we were flying to Rota, Spain.
No, but I mean, what airline was it?
No, it was a Navy plane.
Oh, MATS, okay.
Yeah,
all right.
and C1, I'll say it's a C-141, a transport plane, but we got to Rota, Spain, and like I said, you don't know anybody there either. You go through the same thing, and they tell you you're going to be doing this, and you go over to, you're in like a holding pattern. So 2-3 days go by, you stay on this, you're on this base, and then you're going to be meeting your ship. And I think I took a flight to Rhodes, Greece, I think it was, and that was my first spot. That's where I was meeting I was on an aircraft carrier, and my friend, he was going to be meeting another ship. And you just go there and you see these, what they call Liberty boats, because I'm on a carrier, so the carrier can't pull up to the docks. It's got to be out to sea a little bit. And I would meet this Liberty boat. And so everything you see now is new. Everything is new. You've never seen anything like, and like I said, you're on your own. But it was so exciting to see kids about your age. I call them kids because you're 19. You think you know, but you don't know.
You know, diddly.
Diddly. So you take this Liberty, it's a Liberty boat, probably 6 or 8 people on the boat. They take you out to the ship, and then you walk the plank, shall we say, to go up the stairs to get onto this ship, and you tell them that you're reporting for duty. You tell them who you are. At the time, I was a Seaman First Class, I think. Seaman First Class, Seaman Private, whatever it was. I was the lowest of the low. And they take you down to personnel to get you indoctrinated.
Mm-hmm.
They take you around. Someone shows you around the ship a little bit. But, I'm on an aircraft carrier with 4,200 people. It's the biggest thing I've ever seen in my life.
42 weeks she's going around the damn thing.
And, they take you up, and you get up by the flight deck. And I had a bunk up there. And once again, I picked the top rack because I was small. I figured, well, I'm not going to fall out of it. And, let the big guys have
Plus
the lower
the guy
ones.
above can't puke on you.
Yeah. And so you have your little bunk, and it's amazing. The bunks go 3 high, and you take all your laundry or uniforms, you stuff them into the thing, and then you pull the thing down, put your lock on it, and that's it. That's it. And you get your little bunk there, and next thing you know, you're talking to people and whatnot, and people are wishing you well, and most people are a couple years older than you, much older. Some people are teasing you, saying, "Oh, geez, you got so long to go. The world isn't going to last that long." This was 1971, and I got to go to 1975, but you're not even thinking to 1972.
Well, did you then get an option to select what you wanted to strike for?
Well, no, because I just know that I'm reporting to what they call the mess decks. When you be going down to eat the next day, they had told you that that's going to be, well, we call it KP, I guess, in the Army they do. And you're going to be assigned to, so the next day I reported for duty, and they take you around, show you around different places that you're going to be working, serve, whether you're on the serving line or whatnot, they bounce you around. I vividly recall that I had no idea what they did with the food. They had a gigantic, I'm going to call it a dumpster, but what it really is, it churned up the food to make it liquid. And then they would dump the liquid, And I never,
overboard?
Yeah. I never understood where the trash went. I'm just a
Feed the
kid.
fish.
Yeah. I never understood when they said, get rid of the trash, that you would take it to what they call the fantail, which is the back of the ship, and just throw it overboard. And
in harbor, though?
Oh, when you're out to sea, you just toss it over.
I know that, but I said if you're in the harbor now, you're out to sea.
We'd gone out to sea.
Oh, you didn't say that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, so when I came aboard that thing there on the 4th, I landed on the 1st, the 4th, the next morning we were out to sea.
Okay.
And so I had taken that Liberty boat, now we're out to sea. And, exciting when you, like I said, we'd gone down to eat, but you go out and you, on the decks that they say, and you look out and you see this gigantic blue sea, the Atlantic Ocean, I mean, you maybe swam in it as a kid, whether you went to Rockport or,
Miami Beach.
Yeah, or whatever, Hampton Beach or whatnot, that was the Atlantic Ocean to you. Now it's the Blue Yonder, you know. And then you finally go up. They let you go up and look around the place. They give you a couple hours to look around. You get up on the top deck, what they call the flight deck, and you see all these planes. Oh, my Lord. And you have no idea how these planes get on or get off. And then you finally realize that arresting hook that comes out and catches the plane when it lands, and they catapults them off. And, you know, you'll get to more of that later, but just to see it is like, I mean, it's like to die for. You've never seen anything like it. You know, you're a young kid and you're taking it all in. I think they had flight ups maybe the second day we were out to sea. And you see these planes taking off, and you're just mesmerized.
Now, where were you standing when they were doing it? Were you
Well,
below
you'd stand
decks,
around.
on the side?
Oh, yeah, you could be on the side of the
Okay.
ship, and you know, I call it. Well, the operations are right in the middle there, and they're
Or the island?
Yeah, the island, and they direct all the people there, and you'd see the people out there waving their arms and whatnot, marshalling planes, and you just can't believe it. You know, one minute you in high school thinking about girls and whatnot, and what's going to happen during the weekends, and the next thing you know, you're seeing. And this flight deck, I recall that I think it was 78 feet to the water. That's what a flight deck was, you know. And when a plane takes off, you know, you're 50 yards away watching these things, and the plane just takes off and it goes down before
You think it lost it?
it descends before it ascends. And it's just amazing, you know, all kinds of different things. And you're thinking, and they would announce, you know, flight ups at such and such a time. And, you know, it was all Zulu time, 10:05 it would start, and it ended 13:21, which is 1:21. And you'd see all these things. Well, you know, it wasn't all fun and games. You report, and then you work down these things. We worked a couple of meals, and they kept you down there, and then you'd go around to find out what was on ship. They had a movie theater, and they had where you go buy your soap and stuff, and you know, you get down to dispersing. Get paid on the 15th and the 30th of every month, and that was really it was like being in a chow line. You just stand in line, you'd come through, and they'd give you this thing, and I think I made like $29 or something like that.
Overpaid, huh?
Yeah, and they'd give you the cash. It was all in cash. And eventually, when I get my job at the post office, that's where the money would come aboard. And it was $2 million they'd bring aboard for payday. You know, you don't realize it that. You had no idea where the money came from. You just knew you get your $29, and you might spend your money buying Coca-Cola or whatever they had on board.
You ever get suckered into card games?
No, I wasn't much of a card player. I kind of stayed away from that. But I was telling you, when I worked as a mess cook, they had, you know, you get to meet some of the folk, and the guy that was in charge of us was a really nice guy. He was from Albuquerque, New Mexico. His name was Vincent Armijo, Armijo. But most people couldn't pronounce his name, so they called him Armijo. And he was friendly with me, and he asked me what I wanted to do. You know, like I said, you were young. I hadn't thought of what I was going to. I wanted to be in communications of some form. And his friend was in charge of the postal clerks. And he thought, well, yeah, I was kind of an outgoing guy and whatnot. He goes, there's a good job for you. You know, those guys get to meet everybody on ship. They sell money orders. They have it made. They don't have to go stand watches up on the deck and this and that. It was kind of I shouldn't call it cupcake, but it was a good, and most of the guys were outgoing. And you would be in like X division, where they had the guys that wrote for the newspaper and the chaplain's office and personnel. And there was, shall we say, the more educated group on the ship. And he thought that'd be good for me, a good place for me. And his buddy was in charge up there. So that's where he was going to get me assigned.
Oh,
but he was also in charge of all the mess cooks. He assigned people. And a new thing they had back then was a donut maker. This was 1971. They had a donut machine that could make 90 dozen donuts an hour.
Wow.
Now, it doesn't sound like much, but, you know, donuts aren't, they didn't have Dunkin' Donuts and Heavenly Hash and all those places back then that they have nowadays. You were taken in by these, by this machine that would make these donuts. And once again, everybody loved donuts. So they were coming by to everybody wanted donuts. They didn't want to
You had
stand
to
in
pay
line.
for them, you just give them
No,
out?
they give them out, and they came in trays. So if you gave out a tray, you needed to get your tray back. And so we would pass them out, and you know, like I said, I worked. You know, when I got that job in the post office, everybody knew me. Everybody knew me from the donut shop. Everybody knew me from post office, and it really was it was a perfect spot for me because I liked the action. And you'd go meet the plane when the plane came in. When they said mail call, people were so excited.
Oh, yeah.
And then, you know, I was on the carrier for a couple of years, and they had
Which carrier was this now, the Roosevelt?
that was on the Roosevelt. And then I got reassigned to the Jesse L. Brown, which was a new ship. And as I told you before, Captain Hudner had tried to save this Jesse L. Brown, who was the first black aviator killed in Korea. And so our new ship, which was commissioned in Boston in 1973, the Navy loved it. They thought this was their bellwether ship, and they were going to showcase this ship.
Yeah.
And so they had Captain Fogarty. The executive office was Thomas Lynch, who was on the football team with Roger Staubach. He was the captain of the team. And so we had the commissioning in Boston. There was the Senator Edward Brooke. There was Wayne Hayes, the congressman from Ohio. Like I told you before, the executive officer Lynch, his brother was playing on the Kansas City Chiefs, so he came to the commissioning. Roger Staubach came, and it was such an exciting time because it was a new ship. It was smaller. They only had 225 people on the ship. I was coming from a ship that had 4,200, and we got plush duty. We went to Guantanamo Bay 3-4 times for training. We went. You know, we took a Mediterranean cruise. We went 2 years, back-to-back years. We got plush ports and whatnot. They really loved us. And we were kind of, shall we say, famous because our ship was named for a black aviator.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, as you go back in time, it was, you know, segregation didn't really happen.
But it was on a current.
Yeah. And when I should back up on the commissioning, the wife, the widow of the pilot who was killed, her name was Mrs. Thorne. She had remarried, and she was at the commissioning ceremony.
Did she hit the bottle?
Yeah, she did. She cracked the bottle, and she got to meet the man who had tried to save her husband.
Ooh.
And who had received the Medal of Honor. And when I should tell you, when we got our assignments to, I was assigned to pick up the Medal of Honor winner at Logan Airport because I was from Massachusetts, so they figured I knew.
As a driver or just as a guide?
As a driver.
Okay.
They figured I'd know my way over to Logan Airport, which I did, and I went over to pick up the Medal of Honor recipient. But I had my heart set on picking up Roger Staubach. I thought that I knew a lot about sports. I knew the executive officer. I knew he knew. And he was our boss because we were in X division. And I used to talk to him all the time about football and whatnot.
Ooh.
And he said to me, he said, you'll get to meet Roger, but the most important person is the Medal of Honor recipient.
Amen.
So I went over and picked him up, brought him back to the ship. And when he came aboard the ship, that's when the commencement ceremony started. Mm-hmm. And it was such a huge deal. You know, I finally realized, now I was 21 years old, I finally realized it was not all fun and games, that people had served their country and done all these things. And to give that person a ride back to the airport and to shake his hand, that to me was the highlight of my 4 years in the service.
Oh.
You know, you get to see all these things, you go to all these places, you know, you meet all kinds of fancy, funny people. Everybody's the same age. You could never do it at advanced age because you do as you're told when you're 18 to 22. Wow. You know, it's a privilege to be in the service and to represent your country. You know, it was during the Vietnam era. I was in the Navy. It just was a pleasure to be there and to learn all about it. I have to say, I'm so glad I didn't read about things like the Indianapolis sinking and stuff like that because I never had any fear on ship. I never saw any action. It was all fun and games.
No, but when you went from port to port, they took up med cruises Your job is to make sure that you get all the daily mail and then bring it to them.
Yeah,
bring
it was
back.
really, you know, I was a driver, and I would go with another person. We'd go to, you know, all the ports and pick up the mail and stuff like that. And I suppose you could say that Bob, as you mentioned, every job is important. No,
They have to
no
be.
job, well, some are probably more important than others, but working in the post office and seeing all the people, and it really was a lot of fun. And I wouldn't change it for the world.
Okay.
The 4 years I spent, it was the best 4 years of my life.
She's giving us a sign. I guess we have to hang up. Before I leave, one good question, and you've answered already, I think, but was that service activity helpful in making you a better person than you come out in the real world?
Yeah, I think it is, because you know, when you see, you know, like on Veterans Day, when you get, I'll give you an example. I went to the Patriots game in Cleveland last year, and 73,000 fans, and they asked all Navy veterans to stand up. Now, the only thing I could think of is that it was the week of the anniversary of the Navy. But, so anyway, there's 73,000 in the ballpark. I think there were maybe 10 people that stood up.
Really?
Maybe 10.
Wow.
And so you're saying to yourself, you know, you're so proud to represent your country and to people say all these nice things to you, but, you know, nobody that wasn't in the Navy stood up. The only people that stand up are the ones that were in the Navy. And there were maybe 10 of us.
No.
And I was thinking to myself, they didn't say all armed services, they just said the
The
Navy.
Navy, oh, yeah.
So I stood up. You know, you don't look for any fame or fortune and stuff like that, but, you know, I think sometimes when you say, yeah, you served your country, you'd like to think that it was important.
Amen.
Yes.
I'm going to have to say thank you. We got a lot of stuff we didn't touch, but I guess we're running against the clock.
Yes. Bob,
3 words.
nice to talk to you.
Thank
Very
you,
nice.
my friend.
And I hope to be able to get somebody else to talk to
We
you too.
will. Before I sign off, folks, I forgot to mention this. This is a special series of numbers, if you will, 211. It's a telephone link throughout the state of New Hampshire. Any guy and gal who may be needing help, or if your friends think you might need some help, call that number, 211. The only requirement is you've had to have at least 6 months honorable service and an honorable discharge. Bob Stevens saying thank you for listening. Come and see us, please. Goodbye.